Welcome to another X Space hosted by Democrats for an informed approach to gender. I'm Lisa Simeone. DIAG is a 501c3 organization dedicated to shedding light on the harms of gender ideology, the erosion of women's rights, and the medical scandal of so-called gender-affirming care. Please visit our website, di-ag.org, to learn more about our mission. Our topic today is a shocking example of what can happen when men, including violent sex offenders, are allowed to declare themselves women. In Massachusetts, state law mandates that inmates be incarcerated based on their, quote, gender identity rather than their sex. It's not hard to imagine that male criminals would want to take advantage of this statute and, quote, identify themselves into women's prisons. And they do. One of our guests, Romm, is a mental health professional and investigative reporter. She's also a member of our DIAG team. We're also joined today by Danielle Laurenti, a corrections officer in the Massachusetts State Prison System. I'm going to welcome you both, but I also want to make sure that we can hear each other because we've had a problem. We've had some technical problems, and I'm going to ask if Danielle or Forrest can chime in. I want to welcome you. Danielle, I think that you're here. I'm not sure Forrest has tuned in. Yes,
Hi,
they
yeah,
have.
I just made it. Yes. And I
Yay!
just unmuted. I'm glad it worked. Yeah. Thanks
Okay.
for having us.
Okay, sometimes this happens. All right, so let's.
So just, I've invited
Yes.
Danielle to speak. I don't think she's able to respond or she's not seeing the invite. So Danielle, if you're just not able to accept the speaker invitation, please log out and log back in. Don't just leave, but log out and log. Oh, there we go. Great.
Yay.
All yours, Lisa. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so welcome, Danielle, and welcome, Forrest, and we'll get going with this conversation. Thank you both for being here. Let's start with Forrest, okay? You looked at MCI-Framingham, which is a Massachusetts women's prison that houses trans-identified males. Now, you wrote about it in an op-ed published in The Hill. I think a lot of our listeners have read that. Tell us how many male inmates you found there in this women's prison, who they were, and what kinds of crimes they committed. Forrest Romm, thank you.
Yeah, that is why I set out to sort of answer that question specifically, because it was really hard to get that information without talking to women at the prison. So that was initially what motivated me. And I have found out there are 12 men at the prison. They their crimes range. I mean, they're all convicted of, as far as I'm aware, all convicted of violent crimes. I was able to ascertain that information for all but one of them, whose background is very mysterious and nobody seems to know what he did. But roughly 50% of them are convicted of sexual crimes against women and children. And not that, they're like, there's a level 3 sex offender, at least one level 3 sex offender. And I say that to clarify, it's not like like accidentally peed in public and ended up on the sex offender registry. These are guys who did really, really awful things to women and children. One of them nearly decapitated his wife with a piano wire. And he is one of the men who is not there for a sexually related crime. So the violent crimes also involve violence against women. Let's see, there's Kenneth Hunt, who goes by Kathina Sonia, who, sexually assaulted and murdered 2 women. One of them was his cousin in a really horrific crime. He has been a terror for the women in prison. There is Charlize Horton, who's Charles Horton, who abducted and raped a 14-year-old a couple times. And this was after he was already a convicted level 3 sex offender. So yeah, I mean, there's tons of examples like that. I don't think you necessarily need me to get into the graphic details of each of them, but suffice to say, it's really sordid stuff, and it's shocking to find out that those are the men who are being locked up in a prison with women.
Okay, this sounds so crazy, but I know people listening, the people in our audience are probably already aware of this, but it does sound totally unbelievable that this could be even allowed to happen. So first of all, how did you even get this information?
Yeah, so I think I spent about a month maybe trying to just get it through like basically paster journalism, where I was just scouring court records and trying to like track transfer data and trying to, do like FOIA requests. And it was almost not even, no, almost, it was impossible to get this information that way because first of all, like I don't know about other state level prisons, but in Massachusetts, the Mass DOC, they're obscurantists. Like they make it really difficult to learn what's going on inside the prison. It's a very pro-prisoner, anti-public sort of paradigm where it's about protecting prisoner information over, public safety and awareness. So that was really hard. And then compounded by the fact that these men, almost every single one except for William McConville, have changed their names after their crimes, and media catches on, and obviously because most outlets are following the whatever Trans Journalists Association style book, I can never remember what that's called. They report that these crimes were committed by women using the preferred name and pronouns, and so if you're doing a sort of like cross-referencing process of, which is like a painstaking thing in general, it's pretty much impossible. So I reached out to to women in the prison through Core Links, which is like their version of email because they don't have internet access. And over about 6 months or so, I just had, I mean, tons and tons of conversations with them. The majority of women that I talked to were really happy and eager to discuss this. And for some of them, their feelings about it changed over time, like while I was actively in conversation with them. And yeah, it was just a matter of, I mean, in Massachusetts, you can't even get like mugshots without a FOIA request. So I was worried that I was going to accidentally reach out to some of the women, some of the men, because all I had to go on was their name in the database. And, the men look like they're women in the database by name. So yeah, I mean, Veronica Raymond, like you see Veronica Raymond in Mass DOC inmate list, you think, okay, that's a woman. You don't think Veronica Raymond is a man who quite literally spent, I think, like 22 years at the Massachusetts Treatment Center in Bridgewater, which is reserved for sexually dangerous persons. So it was a sort of like a, yeah, trial and error, reaching out to people, and eventually I found a group of really solid sources, and then over time word got around that I was doing this, and so I also heard from COs. I developed a couple relationships, like long
COs,
relationships.
corrections officers.
Yeah,
Is that
excuse
right?
me. Yeah,
Corrections
corrections
officers.
officers.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I also talked to some representatives at the Correction Officers Union, MACOFU, who Danielle has experience with. So I'm sure she can tell you more about them. But yeah, there was, it sort of evolved just through talking to these women and listening to their stories and then just asking questions, I guess, is how I would put it in a
Well,
nutshell.
you said that, at least I understood you to say that some in the course of your conversation with these women, the actual women, as opposed to the men, fake women, that some of them changed their minds or changed their feelings about the fact that men were being housed with them. Why would they, how or why would they change their feelings? I would just think that automatically they wouldn't want these guys in there.
So yes, they don't. I would say, I mean, I talked to, I don't know, I don't know specifically how many women in total I talked to. It was a large number. There was like a smaller core group that I became like stayed in close contact with and still am. But I talked to a much larger group as well. And only one woman I talked to in this entire investigation was in any way adamant about, supporting trans rights and all that stuff. And she, I think, was a more affluent, like college educated woman, which is not typical in the prison population. So I thought that was interesting as an aside. But yeah, so it wasn't so much that they were supportive or happy about it. It was that, and there's a couple women I'm thinking of, one in particular, where she would sort of express her reservations, express fear, especially about, having to share showers and things like that. But she would be very apologetic about it, the way that women are often conditioned to be. Like I know that feeling in myself. So I could just kind of see that she would say basically. So I have this is a good example that'll explain what I'm talking about. She sent me a handwritten letter at one point. Like she sent me several, but she sent this one in particular, and I remember it because she would write. She was telling me about a sexual assault that occurred in the prison in 2024, involving Kenneth Hunt, who I mentioned previously, and she kept writing about she, like in referring to Kenneth with his, stated preferred pronoun of she, and then she would cross it out and put he. So you could just tell that she was sort of at war with herself about like these dueling instincts of one is like, self-preservation, also dignity, like not having to share intimate spaces with like an intact male sex offender, but also at the same time, at least I would say for the first like couple months, really battling with herself because she felt guilty about criticizing them. And I'm not sort of, this isn't really conjecture. Like she explained all this to me eventually. So I'm not just attributing this to her for no reason. Like she was aware of this, that she was going through this process. But yeah, it was mostly a matter of trying not to influence her any one way or the other with my opinions, so that I could make sure that she was that the information was valid and unbiased and uninfluenced, but also just really, I guess, watching her like claim her experience and say like, no, actually, like my like my reality is the reality, which is that this is wrong and I'm in the twilight zone essentially.
Okay, how do these guys, they just what, decree, they just declare, hi, I'm a woman? Or, I mean, do they have to prove, not that you can prove it, but I'm just saying in their minds or the minds of the state of Massachusetts, how do they how do they declare that they're women? Do they have to, will they have taken hormones? Not that that matters because they're still men, but have surgery. You mentioned intact, so I guess they still have their
Mm.
penises, so they are
Yes.
intact. I mean, so they just what, say that I'm a woman?
Yeah, so this is probably one of the more shocking things to people who don't know much about this issue, because like, if anytime I've engaged in debate with people who are still somewhat in any way supportive of this, the retort that I get the most is, well, there's no way that sex offenders or people like men, women, they say, but I have a hard time saying that even when I'm like attributing it to someone as a quote. But yeah, so they'll say, trans women, they are vetted really intensively before they're, approved to transfer to a female facility. So there's no way they're admitting people who are an active threat. No. I mean, under Section 32A of Massachusetts general law, which is related to the 2018 Criminal Justice Reform Act, it specifically says that self-identification, gender identity self-identification, is the only standard that you need. So they can be transferred to a female facility with, or it specifically says in the with or without a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. And like you said, there is no empirical standard. Like there's no tests you take. You don't do a blood test and it comes back like positive for trans. It's literally just somebody saying to a psychiatrist, I'm a woman, and then this whoever it is, psychologist, social worker, whatever, they're like, you're a woman, but they're not even required to do that, and there is no
This is
vetting at all.
insane.
Yeah,
This is
it is
insane. It's
insane.
insane. All right, we're going to get to Danielle in a minute. Danielle, I just have a couple more questions for Forrest. Are these men who claim they're women, are they sometimes sharing the same cell with a woman?
They are not sharing the same cells because they are, from what I've heard from all accounts, they're essentially being coached by activist representation. So they have like extensive legal support from groups like GLAAD and ACLU, and they reference like specific statutes or what have you, in frame any the demands that they make in terms of like wanting special treatment, entitlement, it within the prison system. They'll say that it's like a civil rights issue and the prison is basically scared of getting sued, so they just comply. So every single man who has gone to the prison has been given his own cell immediately, even though it's supposed to be a privilege that you sort of earn over time through decent behavior. They've actually had to displace women from their own cells in order to accommodate that. So they do share communal showers that they're allowed to use. Well, actually, the men have a special shower time twice a day for 15 minutes, during which the entire female population is locked in their cells and cannot use the shower. but the men are also allowed to shower at any time they want to during general population hours with the women, and many choose to do that. So at first, when I heard that about the cell, my instinct was like, okay, well, maybe it's at least a protective measure. And then over time, I found out like, nope, they're still allowed to shower, even though all except two of them like have their male genitals like fully intact.
Okay.
And oh, and to the other part of your question, from what I've been told, not just from inmates, but from union representatives and COs, significant number of them, I'm not sure how many, but a significant number of them cease taking cross-sex hormones after they are transferred to the female facility.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, Christmas or holiday, here we are men and we get
Mm-hmm.
to prey on women. I mean, well, sorry. Anyway, let
Yeah.
me ask you before let me just finish this up. I cannot imagine that women are not complaining about, well, I can't imagine. I guess they're afraid of getting in trouble. Are they complaining about having to share a shower facilities with these guys? And what
Oh,
happens when they
yeah.
complain?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like a lot of the corrections officers, I mean, there are some like shitty ones to be honest, sorry for the language, but I think the majority of them are also extremely unhappy about this situation, and they can't do anything about it because it's not coming from them, it's coming from Milford, it's coming from headquarters, it's a top-down directive. So the people who are issuing these orders don't actually have to deal with the ramifications of them, but the COs do, and the inmates do. So I've heard all kinds of stories. I mean, one woman was reported an incident with Koselleck where he got really aggressive with her. She's really afraid of him, and she has a history of. I mean, most of them do, but she specifically has talked at length about having a history of intimate partner violence with her husband. So she's very frightened of him, and she went to report it, and she informed me that she was actually made to sign a waiver, like I guess some kind of a non-disclosure waiver, and then nothing was done about it. But I mean, even more disturbing is I've heard a pattern. A pattern has been established through my conversations with, again, like not just inmates, but COs and also union reps, that sexual assaults have occurred. I mean, like multiple sexual assaults have occurred. One man in particular has committed multiple sexual assaults himself, and women who report this have experienced punitive retaliation. So one woman, this actually occurred while I was while this investigation was underway, and this one woman who I've been in continued contact with was raped on a unit. It was shut down as a crime scene, but they never brought in outside, uh, you know, investigate. They never brought in an outside legal agency with the legal ability to conduct an external investigation like they're supposed to under certain guidelines, like the Prison Rape Elimination Act guidelines. And instead, they actually put the woman who reported the rape in what is, I mean, they use euphemisms for them now because they don't call it solitary confinement anymore. They call it like restrictive housing or being on a restricted status. Like it's called like behavioral assessments unit status. They did that and they put her in a unit for 40 days where she was basically in solitary confinement. She was allowed to leave once a day to shower, and she spent the rest of the time in the room. And yes, she did not receive the support she was supposed to, and she was pressured into sort of cooperating. So, and it's been described to me in that situation and in others previously with the same assailant, that women have been pressured or coerced through through restrictive housing to recant accusations and claim that they were consensual. So some of these assaults have been written up as disciplinary reports for consensual sexual contact between inmates, which is a PREA violation per policy, not per law. But
And PREA is the
there's
Prison Rape Elimination
correct.
Act. I
Yes,
mean, this is you're telling us, just so people understand, women are being raped or sexually assaulted, however you want to describe that another kind of assault, and they're being blamed. They're being raped
correct.
by men who are pretending they're women, yet the real women, the victims, are being blamed.
Correct. I mean, this one particular kid, he really, I have a real grudge against him because he's just done this like so many times. And he, in particular, he is not there for a sexual crime. And I think that's important because, half measures avail us nothing. Like if there is a chance to, reform this policy, repeal this policy ideally, but reform it, it's not enough to just say, okay, no sex offenders. He's not there for any kind of sex related crime. He's there for other crimes. But yeah, he in particular, he took back his male name like pretty much as soon as he got there. He stopped taking hormones. I was told he was growing a beard. So I mean, some of them are like more committed to, the I'm a woman deal than others. I think some of them are AGPs, like autogynephiles, from how it's been described to me. But some of them, yeah, they're just
And
sociopathic
we should say
opportunists.
autogynephiles are guys who they get
Yes,
sexually aroused by dressing as a woman or imagining themselves as women. So
yes,
when we
but
say
yes,
AGP, autogynephile, okay.
and
All right.
all 12 of them, to be clear, are attracted to women. They're sexually attracted to women.
Yeah, so for them, it's like it's a holiday.
Yes.
Okay, we've mentioned corrections officers, and luckily we have one with us, Danielle Laurenti. Danielle, I want to bring you into the conversation because you worked at MCI Framingham at one point, and as far as I understand, you still work in the Massachusetts prison system, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And Massachusetts law requires that prisons be strip searched by officers not of the same sex, but rather the same quote unquote gender identity. So, what does this mean for you as a corrections officer, as a woman? How has this affected you personally?
Oh, how it's affected me personally, basically, we females, women officers are expected to comply with this law, and we are often threatened with discipline to conduct unclothed slash strip searches of intact male inmates that identify as female.
And did you complain? Is there a way to complain to your higher ups about this, or that's just the law? So there's no way.
um, no, when this first started coming about in 2018, it came forth first as a court order for one particular transgender inmate. And I expressed my serious concerns with complying with this order. I disclosed that in 2012, I had been sexually assaulted. Um, Something that I struggled with for a long time, and it's something that I'm still working through to this day. And basically, even after I made my concerns known and made my inability to conduct these searches known, I was still threatened and ordered to conduct one of these transgender searches. And when I refused to conduct the search, I was immediately removed from my position and I was charged with discipline.
So because you as a woman refused to search a man, basically, that's what we're talking about, you were blamed and you were disciplined for that. There was no sympathy, there was no understanding of the fact that you're a woman and that you have been sexually assaulted in your own life. There was no compassion for that from the higher ups. They didn't care.
Absolutely not. There was actually, it's, when I first joined the DOC in 2010, I was all about like the brotherhood and we're all stick together and they'll protect me. And there was, when push came to shove, when this law came down, there was absolutely no compassion or empathy for anything that I was expressing to them.
And what about your colleagues? What about other women, other female corrections officers? How do they feel about this?
I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone, but everyone that I've spoken to about this, and this is, I've been dealing with this and coping with this since 2018. So I would say I've spoken to many women about this, and without the threat of discipline and possibly losing our jobs, our right to consent to a sexual situation has been stripped from us. We are being forced into sexual situations with intact men. And that right to consent to those situations has been stripped from us. And so women, push come to shove, like if they had their choice, you know what I mean? Like we don't want to do it, and I'm all for like consent, you know what I mean? Like every woman has the right to choose, should have the right to choose whether they want to comply with the search or they don't want to comply with the search. Every time this is occurring, a sexual assault is happening to a woman, a female officer, a hardworking officer. This is a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister. We're working at a really hard job to begin with, and one of our rights has been taken away, and we don't have the right to consent to these searches, and it's just expected of us. And these searches, if a man was to get naked in front of a woman, in public or on the outside prison walls, that would be a form of sexual assault on that woman. And every time a woman is forced into a room and forced to have a man get naked in front of her, that is a sexual assault on that woman. And we are creating more sexual assault victims. And I have to tell you, like going into those rooms and being forced to conduct these searches, I experienced feelings of humiliation, degradation, shame, guilt. Like I had those same feelings from 2012, and I would experience them every single time all over again. And those are the same feelings that a lot of women correction officers are experiencing and being traumatized by every time they're forced to conduct these searches.
My understanding is that several of you, I don't know if you're a part of the class action lawsuit or grievance, but that
Yes.
eight of you filed a class action grievance. Can you explain that and tell us what's going on with that, please?
Yes, 8 of us got together and we got with the union and were able to work with the union, and we filed a class action grievance stating that our rights were being violated and how detrimental this was to our mental health, how detrimental these searches are to our overall well-being, and not to mention our safety concerns, because like Forrest said, a lot of these men have violent crimes, if not sexual crimes, against women. And we went forward with the grievance. We lost the grievance. We went to arbitration, and ultimately we did not win the arbitration because the arbitrator does not have the legal authority to overturn or adjust or manipulate a law of any kind.
So, because the law says that these men are women, because the law says these men are women, therefore you, as a real woman, a female guard, you're supposed to search these men and pretend they're women and not get upset by it. Is that it? Is that their argument? I mean, you lost in arbitration twice.
There was never an argument. When this law came into play in 2018, it wasn't like they told us that this was happening or this is what they were proposing. Like, we had no idea that this was part of the Reform Bill of 2018. And the bill came out, the Reform Act came out, and there it was written. No one ever considered women or how women feel or how it will detrimentally affect women, the women officers, the women inmates. None of that was ever considered by anyone, in my opinion, and in my research. I haven't seen anything where they considered us at all.
So I also want to clarify that in general, just at prisons in general, male corrections officers sometimes work in female prisons, and female corrections officers sometimes work in male prisons. And even though you're now working in a men's facility, you still might encounter quote unquote trans identified males. So I want to know, are you in this, now that you're working in a men's prison, are you asked to do searches of men, or is the fact that you're a woman and they're men respected? The law says that it has to be same-sex search. So are you now asked to search men or not?
It's not same-sex search, it's same gender identity. The same still applies. So there are trans identified intact males at male prisons that identify as female and request a female to search them.
They request a female to search them. So clearly they're getting
Yes,
some.
they get to indicate what sex or what gender identity they prefer to have conduct searches of them.
Yeah, and I just want to say real
crazy.
quick, like that's important. The fact that
Yes,
it's
Forrest Romm, go ahead.
yeah, just the fact that it's that you can have a guard, a CO search you if you know who shares your quote unquote gender identity upon request. And I emphasize that because I have like an internal document showing the like approvals for different gender based whatever sex based searches by COs, and every single trans identified male has requested and been approved in MCI-Framingham to be strip searched exclusively, so only by female officers. And every single trans identified female inmate in the prison, and there are quite a few, has also been approved to be searched exclusively by female officers. So the trans identified women are, for obvious reasons, not requesting that they be strip searched by men. And I think that's really important because it shows that people on some level understand what these differences are and how dangerous they can be for women.
It's really insane. I mean, I feel like even Margaret Atwood couldn't do justice to this. If she included this in The Handmaid's Tale, it would have been considered too outlandish. I mean, it's just really crazy. It's just crazy. And one of the things, Danielle, I'm going to ask you about this. I know I've heard this argument, which blows my mind because it's equally insane. Apparently, trans identified males claim that they have to serve time in women's prisons because otherwise they'll be targeted by other male prisoners in men's prisons. But, so it's okay that the women in the women's prisons are targeted by them, but it's not okay that I mean, what the hell is going on here? Sorry, that's not really a question. How does the prison address this when a man who claims he's a woman says, well, I must be in a women's prison because if I go into the men's prison, they will attack me?
Yeah,
how do the prisons address
lawsuits
this?
that are going? Yes, there's lawsuits going on right now, and the lawsuits that they've won are mostly targeting the Eighth Amendment of cruel and unusual punishment and safety and security issues. And pretty much the men or the trans men that are in men's prisons are legally working to get to female prisons.
Danielle, what do your male colleagues think about all this?
Most of them are absolutely disgusted and as supportive as they can be throughout this whole thing. When you explain the logistics of this and to any reasonable person, it's obvious. It's obvious that women are being victimized. It's obvious that this is wrong. You know what I mean? And they are, completely supportive of us, which is definitely great. But at the same time, where does that get us? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
we're just kind of like at a standstill right now. And, women are scared to say no in fear of discipline. We aren't asked to do these searches. We are ordered to. We are expected to comply with conducting these searches, and we are subjected to or can be subjected to discipline if Milford headquarters DOC so sees fit if we refuse, up into including termination.
Okay, let me get back to Forrest for just a second here. Forrest, once these men are in the women's prisons, we've already heard you and Danielle both said some of them just stop taking their hormones, so it doesn't matter. But if they want to keep taking hormones, do the taxpayers have to pay for it?
Oh, yeah. And just because they stop taking them doesn't mean they're not still prescribed them. They're prescribed hormones, I think, like basically almost by default. And to be fair, Mass DOC has a track record of not being so quick to approve sex reassignment surgeries because they're extremely expensive, although they have approved those as well. But they tend to be exercise a little bit more restraint about that. When it comes to other services, like, for example, bi-weekly or weekly electrolysis for facial hair removal, body hair removal, voice, what did they call it? Voice feminization coaching for a sex offender for Charlie's Horton, I believe. Oh, yes. I think that was Charlie's Horton. I cannot recall exactly who was just approved for that, but somebody was just one of the convicted sex offenders was just approved for vocal training, things like that. So, prison approved purchases of like women's lingerie to wear, makeup, commissary items like that. And yeah, it's taxpayer funded. Absolutely.
And what about if a woman needs something, like an actual woman? What if she needs, I don't know, has cancer and needs breast reconstruction surgery or whatever? Are these women in the prisons getting this kind of service, getting this medical care?
No, they're not. The women who have claimed a transgender identity, I think have pretty solid access to these services, but that's a whole other story. I mean, it's their mental health is just being completely destroyed by like really reckless prescribers and social workers, and yeah, but that's a whole different story. For women who are dealing with, actual physical conditions, it's really difficult to get good solid care. And I mean, in Massachusetts is like compared to other states is pretty great, like great about that compared to a lot of other places in the country. The state spends more per prisoner than any other state in the country. It spends double per prisoner what Vermont spends, which is the second highest per capita spending in the entire country. So it's not a money issue. It's just a priorities issue, like a values and priorities issue. Yeah, I'm particularly close with one woman who I've come to care for quite a lot, and she was struggling for a while to get basic testing for a very, very serious diagnosis. And she eventually did, but yeah, it was a huge hassle for her, and it took a lot of concerted effort versus, there was a woman, I didn't speak with her directly, but I heard about her through a couple other inmates. There was a woman who had severe back pain from she had like very, very large breasts, and as some women do, like she needed for her physical health, she needed a breast reduction surgery, and she was denied on the grounds that it was cosmetic. But at least one woman, and likely more at the prison, have had double mastectomies funded after claiming a trans identity. That's not considered cosmetic because of, WPATH standards. And that's what is
Uh,
consistently cited to sort of justify it. It's kind of like the stack of cards is like being held up almost single-handedly by WPATH.
and
But the house
WPATH
of
is
cards. Yes.
World Professional, what is this? World Professional Association of
Association
Trans
for
Health,
Transgender Health. Yeah.
and it's a lobbying group. It's an
Yes.
activist group. It is not a medical organization. I want to get that out there. It's a lobbying group.
Yes. So
Okay.
lobbying group, they claim to be a medical organization. They don't necessarily claim it directly, but they claim it,
They imply it.
they've cultivated that reputation. And
Oh,
people who don't look into them closely don't really understand how nefarious a lot of their history actually is. And they're referred to, like if you read any judicial decision that was, involved in like a case that approved one of these male transfers to the women's prison, invariably every single time the judge will say, like Mark L. Wolf, who was the judge who approved Koselleck, they'll say, I'm not an expert on this. I don't know much about it. I want to be a good person. WPATH standards of care says that this is what, this is medically necessary, life-saving treatment. And, if we don't let them go live with women, then like maybe they'll kill themselves, or maybe they'll like, castrate themselves. And ooh, we couldn't ever let that happen. This like hypothetical thing that hasn't happened yet. So yeah, WPATH is the reason that judges are willing to approve this, and that, they're able to get all of these requests for like, quote unquote like non-cosmetic medical treatments through, even though they're like obviously cosmetic, and women would never be approved for. I mean, women aren't approved for like hair loss supplements or anything like that if they're balding. A lot of women have complained about this, which is why there's so much detail. But yeah, it's really, there's a huge double standard. There's basically like a two-tier system inside the prison when it comes to these men.
you've already mentioned, Forrest, that the PREA, I don't know if they pronounce it pre or just say PREA, the Prison Rape Elimination Act. You've mentioned that a couple of times. That's a federal law. So how does that, I mean, how does that affect? Does it affect what's happening in Massachusetts? Does it affect what's happening in an individual state? That the fact that this law exists is supposed to protect prisoners, but yet women are being raped and assaulted by men in their prisons. So how does that work?
Yeah, so it is kind of a little bit complicated here, and because PREA, so yes, like PREA was signed into law in like the early 2000s, and then it was expanded or like implemented, I guess, under Obama, who, you know, added like details about trans identified prisoners, but it's not mandated. So the state prisons don't have to adhere to the guidelines that are put forth in PREA, which, you know, have things about like, you know, strip searching, like no cross-sex strip searches and stuff like that. They only have to adhere to them if they want to be eligible for certain grants, like federal grants and other sources of federal funding that they get contingent on their adherence to the PREA guidelines. So they don't get punished per se. Like they're not breaking the law if they don't implement PREA guidelines. Although, I mean, if they're putting prisoners in, you know, foreseeable way of sexual assault or other foreseeable harm, then it is a constitutional Eighth Amendment issue. But with PREA, yeah, I mean, PREA honestly it sounds like it would be something that was implemented because women in prison are vulnerable to rape, but actually it was designed with men in mind in the first place, because, you know, everyone notoriously is focused on the sort of like archetype of like male on male prison rape, which is definitely a problem. But one of the things about PREA that is really important in this context is that PREA stipulates that that a prison is not allowed to segregate, I think the word that is used in PREA. And I'm not like a legal expert by any means, so you know, double check everything I say, but this is just what I've come to understand. So from reading it, and it says you cannot separate inmates based on their gender identity. It's you know, for like civil rights reasons, it's considered segregation. And so where you could say, okay, yes, like men in prison are vulnerable to rape, the extent of it is actually debatable, but, you know, Danielle can probably tell you more about that. But just, you know, assuming that assuming that the men are vulnerable to rape, not because they're sex offenders who are targeted at a disproportionate rate in men's prisons, but because they're trans identified. Okay, let's put a separate unit in here to keep those prisoners who are vulnerable to assault safe. They can't do that because PREA says that you are not allowed to have a, you know, separate housing for men who identify as women, just because they're men. And really what happened is like the whole thing is because of like the self ID, this idea of self identification. And in my opinion, it's basically a snowball lie. Like I really don't think the DOC believes that these men are women. I think that, you know, in policymakers and you know, like the Democratic establishment, you know, in terms of politicians in the state who are like ignoring this, they don't believe that these men are women, but they can't admit that they're men, because that would mean that there is such a thing as a fake, quote unquote, fake trans identity claim, and that would completely destroy the entire like scaffolding of self-identification. And so they're caught up in like their own mendacity, basically, where they have to keep kind of adhering to the belief or professing their adherence to this ideology and saying that they believe that these are women, even though obviously like they know that they're not women.
Danielle, let me ask you, I think you may have addressed this earlier, but in your experience, is it true that trans identified males are more at risk of assault, of rape from male prisoners than any other male prisoner?
Um, I would say in this day and age that we are in, I would say no. Just like Forrest mentioned previously, inmates identifying as trans are afforded single cell status. So they have their own cell. And it's actually right next to the officer's station. It's one of the first cells in the line of cells. So those cells are single cells, and they house the trans inmates, and other inmates, other male inmates, that identify as male, it's widely accepted. They are not persecuted, they are not ostracized, they are not put on display or humiliated. I have never seen another male inmate mistreat a transgender male inmate. Just in my experience, I haven't seen that, and it's something that is very acceptable
So,
where I've worked at least.
yes, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Okay. Forrest, I meant to ask you about, you were talking about state laws and federal laws, and that makes me think of Trump in his first day in office. He signed this executive order mandating that males in federal prisons have to be sent back to male facilities, and this executive order forbids using federal funds to pay for sex modification procedures. So, Forrest, do you see any sign that the federal government might pull funding from state prison systems? I don't know if they have the power to do that or how any of that works, but do they have the power? Can they do that? Could the feds do that?
Yes, they could. I mean, yes, they absolutely could. They could definitely withhold PREA funding because I mean, at least MCI-Framingham is in obvious violation of like multiple PREA standards, just in their handling of, sexual assault reports and things like that. So yes, they absolutely could apply pressure in that way, and I think that it would actually be effective, just because people tend to respond when you take money away from them. And a lot of people, like their higher ups in the Mass DOC, like they have these sinecure positions, like they're doing like very little and making a ton of money. So they care a lot about funding, and I do think that the Trump administration could apply pressure. I unfortunately, and like I've been pretty open about the fact that like I am pretty much a conservative politically at this point in my life, but I still have criticisms of the administration. And one thing I think that is really unfortunate about this issue is that it kind of falls into a sort of some issues are bipartisan and this one's kind of nonpartisan because on the one hand, not in a good way, like nobody seems to care about it because on the one hand you have the Democrats who are supposed to be the champions of incarcerated people and make sure that their civil rights, their constitutional rights are all being protected. But they have the trans problem, so they can't acknowledge that this is happening or that it's an issue. And then on the other hand, you have the Republicans who do care about, trans and seem to ostensibly give have enough care about it enough to have to started addressing some of these excesses, but they historically are not the most like pro criminal pro prisoner. Like these are people who are inmates who broke the law and are being punished for it. So I think there is an issue with this versus versus like the stuff that has to do with like transgender ideology in children or in schools or in sports, like these things that are very much like kind of neutral, like social, like pro-social, sort of neutral. But when it comes to women in prison, I think there's just not a lot of insight. Like I don't think they know much about it, and I don't know how invested they are in actually doing anything about it, which I think is a mistake because like when people actually understand what's happening, it's like it's like shocking. It's like really shocking. Like this is the kind of thing that could lose Democrats like every election for the foreseeable future. And I wish that even if their administration wasn't motivated by the fact that it's very wrong on a moral level, I do wish that they were at least motivated by like how how salient it is and how like potentially effective it is, politically strategic and expedient, but that doesn't seem to be the case either. So I don't know, I'm hoping that'll change. I think we need more reporting, we need more people who are bringing it to their attention. But for now, yeah, I mean, the executive order was signed, but we have, every executive order has been blocked in a million different ways by like injunctions issued from other judges. So it's, yeah, nothing has really changed. I think on the federal level, this isn't happening at nearly the same rate as it is on a state level. Like, I think there are 22 trans identified men in all federal women's prisons at the moment. And it is a growing problem because that number last, like the year before in 2024, I think was 11. But the number in total is similar to, is lower, for example, than the number at Chowchilla prison, where I think there's like 40 something male prisoners in a women's facility. So this is happening at the state level. And at the state level, it's much harder to get insight and information because it's just more opaque. But I mean, at the federal level, there is still there are issues that I think, like to your point about the administration, they're just not aware of. Like there's a for the Bureau of Prisons Transgender Offender Manual, which is like the federal system's sort of guidebook on how to deal with trans identified inmates. And in it, like it still hasn't been updated since, I can't remember, like 2012, 2015. And it lists WPATH as the sort of like expertise that you're supposed to outsource all of your questions to. So their guidelines reign supreme even in federal prison. And I do think that the administration just doesn't know that, to be honest. Like, I didn't know that until I started reading more about, what was going on, how this was happening, like the sort of mechanisms behind it. So yeah, I hope that they start taking it really seriously at some point, but right now it doesn't seem to be the case.
Before we go to audience questions, which we're going to do in just a couple of minutes, I have one last question for both of you. Let me start with Danielle, and then we'll go to Forrest, which is, isn't there anybody else? I mean, wardens, prison wardens, or officials, state officials of some kind, isn't anybody else standing up for these women? Danielle, have you talked to any wardens or any state officials?
In my experience so far, no one really cares enough. State officials, I've written letters, I've written emails. I can't even get a response back. As for wardens, superintendents of prisons, they are appointed at will by the DOC headquarters and the DOC commissioner. And basically they say it's the law. And so they follow the law. And if they don't follow the law, they will be removed from their position as superintendent. So is anyone going to be putting their job on the line when it doesn't affect them? It doesn't affect the ones that they love. I haven't seen that yet.
Forrest, what about you? Have you talked to anybody who's interested? It seems like women have just fallen to the bottom of the heap and nobody gives a shit. And that's the end of that.
Yeah, pretty much. Like the superintendent currently, Ryan Donlin, is not a good guy. He, visited the woman who was assaulted and then put in solitary confinement. She requested a meeting with him, and he visited her because per the prison's policy, she is supposed to be given a written statement explaining very clearly the grounds for putting her on this like restrictive status. And that didn't happen. So she wanted to know like what their justification was. So he eventually, after she like cajoled a bit, came to see her. And I forgot to mention she was requesting over and over to file a formal grievance, which is something inmates are entitled to per prison policy as well. And she was just ignored. She was not able to file a formal grievance. And he basically just threatened her, just did not take her seriously. He's not somebody who cares at all about this. And to be totally frank, this was one of the more disheartening sort of outcomes that I've experienced in terms of working on a piece and publishing it, because my goal was to generate some response from the state. And I reached out to everybody. I reached out to every single media outlet in Massachusetts, telling them what was going on, giving them very detailed information, being like, you should cover this because it is a story and eventually it's going to gain traction. I reached out to, and I never heard back from anybody. I reached out to the representative of the district that the MCI-Framingham prison is in. They didn't even like pretend to follow up. So they were like, oh yeah, we can schedule a meeting. And I was like, okay, great. And they just never responded and then ignored my follow-ups, which has been my experience with everyone I've reached out to in terms of like political leaders. I even reached out to Leah Foley, who was appointed by Trump. She's an attorney, like a the U.S. attorney for the District of Massachusetts and never got a response. So yeah, I mean, I'm blanking now because there was such a long list of people I was trying to sort of rope into talking with me about this, and it just never happened. Yeah, so it's really disheartening, and I do think it's because very few people care about women. I think that is absolutely true, and I think the women feel the same way. The inmates feel the same way. I know. I mean, it sounds like Danielle feels similarly, and it's a
Oh
difficult
yeah.
issue to sort of continue putting like focusing your attention on, just because of how frustrating it is and how little movement there seems to be around this.
I would totally agree. I've done anything and everything to speak to anyone that would speak to me, and like you said, like it just doesn't seem like anyone cares about women, or our rights being violated or us being harmed.
I hate to add. I hate to add to your disheartening. We're going to go to questions, so I hope people have their questions lined up. I just want to tell this brief story. When Forrest, you said it was disheartening. I know people in the media because I worked in media for 40 years, and I tried to get people interested. And I had a conversation with a woman, a retired physician, no less. So highly educated, retired physician woman, very liberal, like me, very liberal. And I told her what was going on. Her immediate reaction was, this is impossible. It's not going on. So when I proved to her that this is going on, that men are being housed in women's prisons, here's in a nutshell what she said. Prison is a hellhole. Prison is a hellhole anyway for men. So, basically, well, so now it's more of a hellhole for women because men are in with women. I mean, honestly, this was her reaction. It's like, it's
Absolutely
already
horrific.
bad. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's just a horrific. I mean, honestly, the more educated somebody is, like, the worse their answer on this subject is probably going to be, because they're pretending to deny their actual, like senses and their everything that they know to be true. It's like a conditioning that occurs often in higher education. So that makes sense. But I just think it's a shame. I mean, these are the same people who are always like screeching about international law, and like the Nelson Mandela prisoner rules put forth by the UN say very clearly you cannot house women with men for obvious reasons. They seem to have become convinced that rape is an appropriate punishment for women who break the law, and it is obviously not. So it's just a shame.
Okay.
Well, even women that don't break the law, you know what I mean? Like, we are us officers or law abiding citizens that are working a hard job, and we're getting assaulted, and it's just being allowed.
Okay, let's go to audience questions. We have a lot of people listening, so I hope some people have some questions if they would like to ask. And I'm trying to figure this out, this technology. So Martha, you're also watching. If you see somebody raise a hand that I don't see, I'm sure you can click on them, or I hope so. Right now, I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand. Isn't that how it's done here? Sorry, I'm not the tech person with this.
Sorry, we don't have anybody lined up for questions.
Probably because they're all reeling from the horror of this, and seriously, it's like, I know a lot of our listeners already know this. I mean, I know, but I'm sure there are some people listening who do not know all these shocking details and are horrified by what they've heard. Like, how can this be allowed to go on? And people just look you in the face and say, oh yeah, Joe and Johnny are women, and what's the big deal? What's the problem? I mean, really, if that's why I guess a lot of people don't believe it, because it sounds unbelievable. I see one.
It's it's dystopian, because not only are people resistant to discussing it or acknowledging that it's happening, but anybody who does, point it out or want to draw attention to it is not only like ignored, they're like actively penalized for it. So it is rather a frustrating situation.
I see two requests. Is that correct, Ellie? I see, or maybe not. No.
Yes, I just elevating them, John and Precia. So John, why don't you? Oh, let's see, who's Precia is on, and then
Okay.
after those two, that's it. After those two.
Okay, Preja.
I just wanted to know, There's a lot of women in the field of corrections, and are you able to connect with other women in the industry? Because I feel like there's a lot of women out there across the country that are going through similar experiences, and I'm just wondering, is there a network, or have you been able to be in contact with other women in the same situation as you?
I would love to. I haven't been able to connect with women outside of Massachusetts as of yet, but I have had some connection with. I work at a state facility, and I've had some connection with a woman that works at a county facility. So that actually contact just recently happened. So we've begun discussing the topics and what her union's doing, what my union's doing, and things like that. But cultivating those relationships is definitely something I'm interested in.
Just real quick follow up. I just want you to know that I think that that's a good thing, because I can imagine we've all been through it, where you feel alone, that no one else sees what you see, and no one else is, but you're not. And I really do hope you're able to connect with more women in the industry, as well as the women that are online. There's a lot of support for you here. Keep Prison Single Sex is a huge part of this movement. So, all right, thank you very much.
Oh,
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much for your support.
okay, I think we have John next. I'm gonna click, I think, can you?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, my name is Austin. I'm a lawyer in North Carolina. I was sort of am gay. I was also a like TRA in the past, and I would say that two of the things that really piqued me on these issues were first, in particular, the Leah Thomas case in sports, and then it was the Isla Bryson case in Scotland. I'm sure some folks know about the Isla Bryson case, but this was a transgender double rapist who became an enormous problem for Nicola Sturgeon, who was the leader of the Scottish National Party. And she had to resign over it because this person was being housed within the general population of a women's prison in Scotland. And the public realized it was a nightmare. So I have to say that one of the things that I think is most effective is there being a really horrifying face to put on these issues, a villain who just truly upsets people. And this is something that people should be upset over and have that visceral feeling about. I feel like it might be my suggestion is that it might be useful if there is someone in particular. I know that a lot of these cases, especially with trans males who are sex pests, who are in women's prisons, but there has to be one who's just especially egregious, who might have a case that's ongoing or an appeal or something, so people can really put a face to this issue. Thank you, and it was great to listen to both of you and talk about your experiences in Forest. Thanks for your reporting.
Thank you, John. Forrest, I don't know if you want to address, Forrest or Danielle, if you want to address this. I know we have seen,
Yeah.
those of us in this fight, in this struggle, have seen photographs of some of these guys, and they are scary. I mean, they are frightening. The problem is we can't get any of the mainstream media interested in publicizing this.
hmm Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I would say, and I don't mean to be fatalistic about it, because I do think it's worth working on this. And I get where you're coming from, and I think it's a terrific idea, and I think it can be really effective. It got me thinking about, what piqued me, and part actually Danielle's story in International Independent Women's Forum was a big part of that. But also Karen White, various men who were transferred to by the ACLU, or whatever, by a judicial decision, and then ended up sexually assaulting women. So yeah, I mean, I can think of 12 men, because every single man that I've come across at MCI Framingham, they're very scary, and I've talked to some of them myself, and they're very threatening. like off the bat. They're like really, really dangerous, deranged guys. I just so I've talked with Genevieve Gluck quite a bit at Redux, and she really wants to report on this, and I am considering just giving her all of the information that I've had. I guess my only reservation, because she's very good at that, as you said, she's very good at sort of creating fill in with a face. My concern is that the opportunity is lost to sort of get this information into a place where it'll be seen by people who don't already agree, if that makes sense.
It
Because
does
I
make
feel like
sense.
sometimes,
And
yeah, it can get
it
lost
does make sense.
in sort of turf world. Yeah.
But the other problem is, I mean, I'm anticipating this, that even if we were to have that quote poster child or poster man, right, that we would immediately get told that we picked the worst of the worst, and this is so rare, it almost never happens, it hardly ever happens, and we're trying to make all trans people look bad. I mean, I can already hear the criticism coming. Not that that's an excuse, but
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say this, but I sometimes worry that like the only thing that'll get people's attention is if someone is killed. And I hate to say that, but I mean, rape doesn't seem to get anybody irate, hearing about rapes in these prisons. And I feel like information only really emerges either when, like the ACLU brags about like winning a lawsuit, Eighth Amendment lawsuit, or when somebody is sexually assaulted, sometimes by the same person who they just, won the Eighth Amendment lawsuit on behalf of. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to get this. I understand why there aren't more journalists covering this, because it is very hard to get this information, and it honestly doesn't really get to a lot of people, or at least not in the way that affects the kind of change that would motivate the coverage, the kind of attention that you would need to do to cover this effectively.
it looks like, I don't know if Ellie's still with us. It looks like we have another request from, it looked like Emmy requested Emmy. Is that true? I'm going to try to do this, see if I do it right. Okay. Emmy, did you have a question for us? If not, Pija has another one. Okay, let's go to Pija again. No, Emmy, can you go ahead? Can you speak, please?
Hi, good evening. Yes, thank you. Um, Really powerful testimony, I guess you could say, from your guests tonight, and it is, of course, horrific to listen to. I'm just wondering if maybe later in the calendar year, maybe when most of us have thawed out a bit and there's not the current imbroglio going on in Minnesota, if it might be worth trying to identify a day where we come together to highlight not just what's going on there, but what's going on in all of the prisons that are affected by this around the US. Like New York City, Rikers Island has got some horrible men in the female jail right now. New Jersey has got a horrific couple that I'm sure most folks have seen on Redux recently. So I'm wondering if maybe that might be, I mean, with a lot of advanced planning, I'm not saying like, March 1st or something, but maybe to identify a day when we collectively across the US try to highlight where this is happening in all of our many states where it is happening. Just a thought.
Sounds like a good thought. Sounds like maybe something DIAG could do, but DIAG has so much on its plate already, right? Oh, God, that's the problem. Forrest, or Danielle, I don't know what your thoughts might be on this.
I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think the more attention, the better. One of the biggest obstacles is sort of bridging the gap between people's curiosity and their ability to access information easily. Because I know for myself, when I was first looking into this, it's really hard to get specific, detailed information about, who's in what prison, how many, what are their crimes. It takes a while. So yeah, I mean, if people were able to just if we had a database, that we were aggregating these names, stuff like that, just sort of linking resources so that it was easier for people to get information, and demonstrations are one effective way to do that. So I think it's a great idea.
I would agree. I think it's a great idea. I love the thought of getting women together to really have our voice heard. And like Emmy said, it is happening in multiple states, many states across this country, both to female corrections officers and to female inmates.
Emmy, you have a follow-up, I think. It looks like you have a follow-up. Go ahead.
Thank you, and I'll be very brief. In terms of media attention, I have to say, as somebody from the New York area, I was astounded to see one of the reporters on the 11 o'clock news, WNBC New York, actually do a story one night about a woman who is now out of Rikers Island, but who had sued because she had been assaulted in prison by a trans-identified male. And that case has just, I mean, it's like disappeared into the ether after that. But, you know, I mean, maybe that guy, I know I retweeted it multiple times when it, when it first came out and stuff. I mean, maybe that guy, might be somebody to look out for later on in terms of approaching. But also, and I'll just mention this because I know you all at DIAG are super busy doing the great work that you're doing. If women especially wanted to talk about this later on, PJ and I typically host a space on Tuesday afternoons, Eastern time. And, also just Forrest, it's really lovely to meet you. I just followed you, and we get women from all around the US joining us, maybe to carry the conversation further and see if we could make this happen at some point this year. Just throwing that out there. And if I can find the story about this New York woman who's no longer in prison, I'll attach it on to the purple pill, even maybe after the space is closed, because I think you guys are probably getting close to time. So thank you for that.
Okay. It looks like that's it for our questions from the audience. I'm going to thank everyone for tuning in, especially thank our guests, Forrest Romm and Danielle Laurenti. Thank you so much. And before we go, a reminder to our listeners, please check out our website. We are Democrats for an Informed Approach to Gender, DI-AG.org. And while you're there, please visit our merchandise store and please consider hitting the join and donate buttons. I'm Lisa Simeone. Thank you very much.